Hello, everybody. Um, I haven't been talking because I'm at a co-working space and I try not to talk out loud too much. Oh no, I'm running out of water. But Ivea has a good question. I would say probably yes. I think humans spend more time in buildings now than ever in history, and I think most art that gets made is probably done indoors. But also, what the definition of art is an interesting question. Right now, I am working on an illustration for the Anza Borrego Desert Natural History Association, and they asked me to make an illustration that looks like a nature journal page. Hence, the question, the hopefully thought-provoking question for tonight, which is this. And if the answer to this question is yes, then what is the difference between a nature journal page and an illustration? I think I need a refill on water. So this would be a good time if you just want to work on your own pages, just have this as background. I also made a new stamp, which I'm very excited about, as you can probably tell. This is a little tidbit. Technically, I'm not supposed to talk about it, but for my upcoming class. I also have a new book available on blurb.com. Everybody left when I started talking. Okay. I get it. If anyone wants to draw this Roadrunner while I'm drawing this Roadrunner, this would be an opportunity to do that. Okay, so let me get the beak color in. And the overall body color. And take some blue. There's definitely blue in that gray. The color of the beak. These are perfect examples of the types of colors we don't usually pay attention to very much and can be very hard to reproduce. Grays, browns, they're often more complicated than you think. Blacks, greens, maybe all the colors are like that actually. That's part of why I created a whole class on color theory and mixing to match colors in real life for people working in the field, working with watercolors, or working at home with watercolors could work. And that class is going to get published this weekend. It's on Skillshare. If you have Skillshare already, that means it's free. Otherwise, I'm going to try to start having all my classes on my website or on my Patreon. So stay tuned for that if you want more. If you like this kind of stuff for free, whoa, that looks really bad so far. Hopefully we can fix this Roadrunner because right now it looks terrible. So this really is a good example of when it's easier to start with the darks and put the lights in later. Unfortunately, with watercolors, you have to start with the lights and put the darks in later. But certain patterns, certain things in nature, they, for whatever reason, it seems to me, let me know your personal experience, but it seems to me that there's certain things that are easier to conceptualize and draw, starting with the darks and then adding the highlights later. So these little pale feathers on the head of this, I almost said woodpecker, but it's a roadrunner. Those would actually be easier if you drew the dark first and then could put those pale feathers in afterwards. Or maybe it's just me. I don't know. So you can see my drawing, it didn't really get the pattern right. But you can train yourself to do it and think that way. It's kind of like thinking in reverse. And I think that might actually be one of, people always talk about, oh, watercolor is so hard, blah, 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 watercolor, oh my God, it's so hard. And I think maybe there's some truth to that. And one of those things might be the fact that starting with the palest and working your way towards the darkest and always having to do that and not being able to come back in and put some type of opaque pale color on top, that might be able to call that objectively hard. I'm also totally missing this color. It probably should be like, it's black, right? But it probably should be like a warmer black. Whoa. That's very interesting. That's a rabbit hole. If you want to go down thanks, Ivea. I feel like there's probably a group for everything, and that's, I guess you could say that's one of the amazing things about the internet that has turned out to be true for sure, or has continued to be true, is that you can find these little niche things all about something. I mean, back during the Renaissance, would you have been able to find a group of people all hanging out and doing negative space paintings together? people from all over the world, not just Italian guys? Probably not. So I messed up this beak earlier, and I'm going to see if I can sort of fix it with really dark watercolor. So that's the kind of thing that if I were using acrylic or oil, let's not even mention digital, I would have been able to just come back and fix that. So yeah, building up the values, probably one of the things that is objectively harder about watercolor. But I feel like it's something I have been practicing and practicing and practicing for almost at least close to a decade now. And so I think I'm getting better. Like, look at, that's got some value to it, that Roadrunner head. Okay, but it's not clear sailing yet. Let's get back to some Roadrunner images. So let's see here. The lizard. How much detail would I get with that lizard? And remember, this is the question for this evening. Can you still read it when it's the small screen? And if the answer is yes to this question, what are some of the implications of that? Can AI do nature journaling? That's one thing I've been wondering. Okay, let's see here. There's some yellow on this lizard. Whoa, that brush was not clean, and I went right into my yellow with it. Big watercolor faux pas. Look at how polluted that yellow is now. That was a big faux pas. Let's clean it a little bit. Okay, let's go back to mute. People seem to like that better. Okay, so this is really interesting. This photo, so here's a really good example of why this is an important question, I think. Is it possible to make illustrations that look like nature journal pages? And what is the definition of nature journaling? And I think one really important thing that is very important in this day and age and sometimes is forgotten is the difference between direct observation and looking at photos and stuff like that, and the epistemology and critical thinking that are part of, in my opinion, the critical essential nature journaling package. So nature journaling is different from nature art. Nature journaling is not just drawing birds and like making something that looks like this page right here. Nature journaling is you having a direct observation of nature. Nature is a lot of things. It doesn't have to be a road runner eating a lizard in the Anza Desert. It could be you peeling a piece of string cheese and observing how that splits. That's physics, that's nature. It could be you looking at how your fingernails grow. That's biology, that's nature. But I think there's a really important distinction between direct observation and working from photos or other people's or references. So, for example, you might be able to see at the top of this photo here, it says Roadrunner spreading wings to catch prey. Is that an observation or is that an interpretation? Um, how can we use critical thinking a little bit for that is the title that came along with this photo. Um, I'm curious if the Roadrunner looks like it has something in its mouth already. Is it using its wings to catch prey? Could it do that with its wings for other reasons? Those are the kinds of things that if you were there in person, you could ask yourself. But if you're relying on a photo and someone else's interpretation, that is very different from observing something directly. That's just a little bit of a rant there. In terms of artistic techniques, the wings here and the overall pattern of this bird are also a total pain in the butt because especially working with watercolor because there's a lot of pale markings, narrow pale markings all over the wings, all over the back, all over the neck. It's really hard to paint around those with watercolor. So I'm going to use an opaque tool. And if you're a watercolor purist, this is sacrilege or heresy. I can't remember the difference between those two, but there is a technical difference. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to reserve a tiny amount of space around the face, but reserving these whites would be very challenging and very unnatural in terms of like what comes easy for painting techniques. So instead of doing that, I'm going to use opaques. And let's see if I can make myself, here we go, there we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some of this color that I've already mixed up, which has a lot of neutral tint, but also some blues. And I'm basically just going to cover this whole bird because starting with the pale colors and working up to darks is just going to be extremely challenging because you'll lose the pattern. there's a symmetry to this pattern. And things that have like a precise symmetry or precise geometry, you can't just fake them. And the way those pale marks are on the wings um, are definitely a pattern like that. So another thing I'm going to do is I'm noticing this gray is a fine uh, a fine warmth out here, but in here I need something warmer. So I'm actually going to take a bunch of brown and put that into the back. But I also don't want to overdo trying to match the color here. It would actually probably be better for my purposes to maintain the integrity of sort of the volumetric drawing, a simplified cartoonish, even if it were all black, that would probably work. Oh, gotcha. Is that the literal definition of sacrilege, clutching non-existent pearls? That's amazing. All right, I'm gonna go grab something and put it on mute, but feel free to continue drawing from the Roadrunner if you want, or posting your answers to this question. I will be right back. Okay, everyone else left the co-working. Haha. I think. Okay, now I'm gonna simplify some of these other ones. See if we have the back of one. No backs. It's definitely pale underneath. So post in the comments if you're just tuning in, post in the comments your answer to this question or any thoughts you have about this question, because that is what I'm trying to do right now. Did my sound connect? It should be connected. Okay. All right, so on this one, probably shouldn't do this as wet on wet, but we'll just play on the wild side today. Ooh, and if you're interested, I might design a nature journaling trip to the desert where all of these photos were taken. The Anza Borrego Desert. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful in the late winter, early spring. You can nature journal roadrunners. You can nature journal cacti flowering, some wildflowers, all kinds of stuff. I don't know when I'll be able to get it on the calendar. It might not be until like 2026. Put a little of this color in here on this palm tree. Whoa. I'll have to do a bunch of writing still. Dun, dun, dun. Just keep this one here really simple. Okay, so I need some more details on this lizard um, before I can go on to the text. So you can see, I I think this kind of, I would call this homework. This is not nature journaling in my opinion, and I know that that video on that topic got like a lot of feedback, which was really interesting. Um, but this, what I'm doing right now, is not nature journaling at all. I mean, I guess some people will call it nature journaling. That's fine. That's fine. But I think it's a different kind of nature journaling. If what I'm doing right now is nature journaling, it's a very different kind of nature journaling. But regardless of what it's called, like what it's called is probably not the most important thing. Like if that offends somebody that I call this not nature journaling, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but I do think it's important to like make these sort of distinctions between how these different things are done. And what I'm doing right now is very different from if you're like observing something directly. You don't have to go on like a crazy hike. You don't have to be, some fit, like triathlete type person going on some crazy adventure. You can observe things directly anywhere. You can make a little, you could make crystals out of sugar and watch them grow. You could do experiments in your freezer. You could do experiments and watch how your fingernails grow, or like draw your hands or something like that under a microscope. And that would be direct observation. What I'm doing now is like compiling a bunch of stuff, which is cool and it has benefits and whatnot. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to imitate a nature journal page. And one of the things I can learn from doing this is about layout. So if you look over here, I think earlier there was a question from James about whether I use any like highlighters or pens or things like that. And I actually do. I used to use these Tombow pens a fair amount, and specifically for layout stuff. So this is going to be sort of post hoc, but you can see on this original page, I used graphite, but sometimes these Tombow pins can be really good for thinking about layout. Right now it looks a little busy, but if you think about it, it's like there's this block here, this Tombow pin's intentionally the palest Tombow pin that they have, which might be a little too pale for the camera, but if you think about it, there's this major block down here, sort of like a content block, you could call it. Then there's another one here, and these are like images in here, so this part is a little bit more loose. And then there's another one up here. And even though I wouldn't consider this nature journaling, by doing this kind of thing, you're practicing techniques and ways of seeing and seeing and thinking and drawing that apply to your nature journaling. So doing this kind of stuff at home, doing what I'm doing, practicing like polishing it, doing more illustration type stuff, thinking about how the page is arranged. Those are the kind of things that can definitely help you later when you're in the field and you have to make decisions quickly. Hopefully that makes sense. And I'm going to get set up over here for the final part of this page. I'm also going to close these blinds because it's getting to be dark and I don't like having blinds open, windows near me when there's light inside and it's dark outside. Oops. My mom is don't be in a house that's all lit up when it's dark outside. I feel like for creative work, it's a lot easier if you don't have that feeling that people could be looking in at you. All right, it's nighttime in the co-work. Back to the action camera. Okay, now I have to come up with a bunch of words. That's still wet. This is the weirdest part because I have to make this part up. So, what questions about Roadrunner? What's the best question about Roadrunners people can think of? Sometimes you have to come up with a bunch of bad questions before the good ones start to come out. It's like priming a pump. You just have to get the questions flowing through the machine and then, or not the machine, through you. um, and then better questions will start to come out. Do they fledge since they are mostly ground birds? Ooh. Ivea, can I put your question on this page? That's a good one. Whoa. What is camouflage? Oh, you can tell when someone practices asking questions. Okay, so I'm going to start with how do they cope with the heat? I'll start with that. So there is an assumption built into that question. How do they cope with the heat? Lots of questions have assumptions built into them, and it's a good practice to critical thinking. This is one of the transferable skills from nature journaling is critical thinking. So like for kids or, for adults, critical thinking is useful as well, especially like if you think about the country I'm currently in, the United States of America. Critical thinking is essential to the healthy functioning of a democratic republic. And that was one of the assumptions of the US Constitution, is that the general adult populace would have a good grasp of logic and rhetoric and critical thinking and how to make decisions based on information that you receive. Anyways, you can practice critical thinking with nature journaling. It also assumes that they are coping. How do they cope with the heat? Part of that question assumes that they cope with the heat. What if they don't cope with the heat? So the way we formulate our questions can lead us in certain directions that don't allow for other possibilities. And I think nature can be really complicated. So um, another question maybe could be, do road runners have adaptations that increase their survival, maybe in heat? Another specific question would be, are there limits to those adaptations? Um, I think writing down the questions, and I mean we're brainstorming right now. So if you have multiple people bouncing questions off each other, if you're bouncing questions off the paper, writing them down, those are all ways that you get to better questions. So I think it's really important to think of this iteratively and Fernando Gomez Baptista that I just interviewed a couple hours ago. He's an illustrator for National Geographic. He talked about how to develop these amazing infographics that get published for millions of people to look at for National Geographic magazine. He goes through all kinds of stages of iteration. So the first idea is not the final one. He's bouncing it off of other people. They're saying, no, this should be this way or that should be that way. He's going through cycles himself. There's like teams of people looking at it. And that sounds really annoying from an artistic point of view. But I think that the inspiring part is that it's an iteration, and asking questions is that way too. And you don't have to have like a team of people on a Zoom telling you your drawing should be like this or like that, but nature does that too. So if you're out there actually observing this roadrunner, it is the one that you're in a session with giving you the feedback, because you look up at it and you're like, no, its beak isn't quite like that. It's a little bit more this way. And then you make your drawing a little bit different. You make your next drawing a little bit closer, a little bit better. And each time you're trying to figure it out. And it's the same with the questions. We're trying to learn. We're not trying to come up with the best perfect question on our first try. That's unrealistic. And the way to actually learn and improve is iteratively. So that's a lot of questions. Maybe I should put some more questions. How do other birds adapt? Where do they get their water from? Do they need water? And then another critical one is, how am I connected to them and their survival? Or how are humans in general connected to them or responsible? Or how has human development in Anza Borrego influenced roadrunners? I'm sort of brainstorming here. Um, how do human decisions, okay, here we go. How do human decisions in Anza Borrego impact roadrunners? There we go. How do human choices in Anza Borrego influence? There's an assumption in that question. How do human choices in Anza Borrego influence roadrunners? And then I put, if at all. If at all. That's the critical thinking. Okay, I feel like that's a good faux nature journal page or whatever. And you can see this still hasn't dried. Is it dry enough for me to put the white? It's almost dry enough for me to put the white on it. But another thing I think I'm going to do is I'm going to make this into a silhouette with just like one solid neutral color. And I guess I am the same color as the Roadrunner, at least in silhouette. Oh, I'm going to put another question. Oh, I guess I didn't originally intend to make that all gray. Do I relate to the Roadrunner? It's a good question. Really good question. What about the lizard? Don't. I'm gonna relate to the Roadrunner when it's time for me to make dinner, finally. Oh my god. Don't. I don't know, the eyeball on the Roadrunner is definitely kind of intense. I kind of feel like this text down here needs a box around it. So just talking about layout, if you look at this page, it's not very balanced. There's a couple things I could do here. This is just art, okay? But there's a couple things I could do here. Ideally, the bottom of the page should be heavier anyways. So right now, it's not even balanced. It's less heavy than the top. Ideally, this would be a little bit more heavy than the top, probably. As long as you exist in a dimension where books are read with like this as the top and this as the bottom, because you exist in one of those dimensions, it usually seems to be helpful if the bottom is a little bit heavier design wise than the top. So one possibility would be I could use the gray ink and make a box around the text. I could use the black ink and make a box around the text, and that would sort of match this one. Another thing would be to paint a wash. So I could do like a pale wash, or I could even use like this Tombow pen that I used over here and just kind of color the whole background. But this is when it's important to have waterproof pigment-based inks. And I can't remember how much this gray runs. So I don't think I'm going to do a watercolor wash. I think I'm just going to do the black box. So boxes are, I forget who it was, but there was someone that said that most of art is just rectangles, and that's it. It's all rectangles, and that could be there's a certain amount of truth to that. And if you get really good at rectangles, then that's art. So just doing that rectangle there, I think changed this page a lot. And now that might be dry enough. So we have to decide which unsexy opaque white tool we're going to use. They're all unsexy and have their downsides, but the main ones that I use are this Presto Jumbo Correction Pin. It's by Pentel. And this is a Uniball Signo Broad, I think, white. So this is basically like a gel pen. And let's look at that picture of the back of the Roadrunner again. Here we go. So I'm not even going to look at how there's sort of an iridescence or rainbow in some of those feathers. I'm not going to deal with that right now. I've got a little bit of the orange color on the face, and I just want to sort of try to match this pattern, the radial, it's almost like a radial pattern of the feathers, how those feathers are spread out. I think I'm going to use the Jumbo Correction Pin. It's a little bit broader than the other one. Ideally with these kind of things, or ideally with a lot of art supplies, you test them on a separate bit of paper before you go onto your main paper, right? You already knew that. I'm no, there's secret notes written on here. Okay, it's flowing. Boom, it's flowing. So now this stuff does not smell good, so make sure you're in a well-ventilated area. So I'm noticing there's kind of these two sets of lines coming off of the feather tips here, like one line on each feather. And I'm trying to make sure that it matches this overall big picture pattern, which shows the sort of symmetry of the bird. And there are evolutionary theories that suggest that there's certain patterns in animals that exaggerate the symmetry. And if there's a little bit of asymmetry in the animal's face, let's just use humans as an example. Um, if there's some asymmetry on your face, your eyebrows might accentuate that, for example, and other humans will be very aware of that. And the the more far away from symmetry an animal is, then it can be an indication of like it has a disease or it's not as healthy or something. So there is a theory of evolutionary sexual selection that suggests that certain animal patterns are um, actually sort of ways that indicate and make it very obvious if an animal is lacking symmetry, or its thighs aren't very thick, or its wings aren't very straight, which would all be useful information for a potential mate that wants to know, like, oh, you're missing a bunch of tail feathers. Like if you're a peacock, maybe I don't want to mate with you because eggs are very expensive and sperm is very cheap in nature. Okay, so unfortunately, if you're an artist and you're trying to quickly show an animal, some of those patterns make it harder to draw the animal. Isn't that a funny coincidence? Oh, Amy's here. Ooh, love the desert. Yeah, it was supposed to be really hot here today, but ended up being better than yesterday. Okay, so I think I'm done with this page. Um, this is supposed to be getting used in a publication in Anza Borrego. So thanks for helping me make it. And more information on that coming soon. Also, stay tuned. This Friday, I think it's this Friday, I might be doing a video getting rid of a bunch of art supplies. I have like I have to cut back a little bit on art supplies, and I have like all these like different sketchbooks and um, things like that. And I'm currently living out of my car, so I can't really deal with all of this stuff. Like washi tape, different sketchbooks, different types of paper, things like that. So I think I might do a crazy video. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to figure out the logistics of getting rid of art supplies and then trying to mail them to people. So like whoever claims it during the live video, I would try to mail it to them. And if they would have to like pay for I don't know how expensive the shipping is going to be, but can figure that part out. Um, and Amy, I don't think I got your email about Costa Rica unless did you send it in the last like 20 minutes? I Lately I've been checking email like 4 times a day, but normally I check it like every 3 days, but I don't think I got I checked my email earlier today and didn't see it. So, and I checked my junk mail earlier today too. But anyways, do reach out, marley339 at gmail.com, and I'll get back to you. And that's it for today. Is it possible to make nature journal like illustrations? Thanks for joining in the process. If you haven't already, be sure to watch the Fernando Gomez Baptista interview. It was very interesting. He's a National Geographic illustrator, and I've got more videos coming soon. I'll do a live as soon as shed.com is out for the Wild Wonder Conference, because that's always very confusing for people. Amy, I didn't see your email. Do email me again if you're interested in coming on the trip. It's possible to get another space, but I would have to check with all of our different providers, because currently we're set at, I think, 10 people. So please email me again. And then Eve, I sent you a thing to schedule a time to meet. All right, bye everybody. Good night. Do some sketching or nature journaling or illustration or art journaling or junk journaling or scrapbooking.